Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Johnny Mac, say hello to our good friend Jake.
Hey, Jake, amazing background. Really excited to have you on today. Thank you for doing this.
I thank both the Johns for having me, right? Like, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to come on, Revenue Builders and share some wisdom about leadership and life. And man, I really appreciate the opportunity.
So we're really excited to have you up. You and I did a couple of prep calls, and we must spend an hour on your incredible background. Talk to us. We're going to talk about Navy SEALs. We're going to talk about all this stuff and leadership, but you have an incredibly interesting upbringing. Could you kind of share with us a little bit, kind of pre-college, your upbringing?
So, I was blessed, man. I grew up in Washington State between Puyallup, where my grandparents lived for 50 years, and a little town called Steilacoom, which is right next to Fort Lewis, but it's like a little enclave of 5,000 people. We've owned our house. Our house has been in the family since 1910. So, my dad grew up in that house. My grandfather was there when I moved in. And, it's just a really unique place to grow up. I can be in the water. The Puget Sound is two blocks in front of my house, about a 9-iron. If I'm a little short on my 9-iron, I'm hitting cars in the parking lot. I got to go inside for a couple weeks, But I spent a lot of time in a boat, fishing. I spent a lot of time on South Fort Lewis, just being, a kid growing up with all of my buddies. All my buddies' parents were E9s, regimental sergeant majors, battalion sergeant majors in the Army. I tell everybody maybe one of the most influential things was MacGyver and the A-Team, because, I want to be B.A. Baracus. Like, that was my guy. He's always building stuff. And my dad, my stepfather that raised me, a very violent individual, but also had straight A's in mechanical engineering at the University of Washington, didn't graduate. But when we had a fight in high school, I told him, was kind of complaining about some stuff, and he whipped out this yellow transcript with all A's. I kind of shut up after that. I was like, okay, my man did some work. But, we built a water wheel in my yard that pumped water for 40 years. Built the whole thing, the pump, the water wheel, everything, because he got pissed that he had to pay the city for water. We had a creek running through our yard, so he built a water wheel, And so I learned engineering at a very young age. And, I had a lot of independence. I left the house at 7 a.m. I came back at 5. We would be anywhere from Steilacoom to Chambers Creek to the Godfather's Pizza, 7 miles away for the buffet. We would take our own cups and plates. And we did that for about 4 years. And then the manager called us on it one time when we were like 8th grade. We had gotten a lot older. He's like, look, man, y'all been coming in here for 4 years straight. You got the same cups and plates that you had 4 years ago. We're like, all right, man, we got you, So just a great kid, man. I got the same 10 friends that I've had since the 1st grade. Ammon Williams came in the 3rd grade, and Bernard was in town, but he went to Annie Wright, and, it's the same 10 dudes. Like,
now, you had this, how you described it to me was, you didn't have much affinity for school, but you were a freak in math and science. And talk a little bit about how that actually manifested itself in life.
Okay, so here's the crux of the matter. The first 3 years of school, I had the same teacher. God bless her heart. Mrs. Wyrick was awesome. But my 1st grade teacher got pregnant. Mrs. Wyrick was kind of the substitute, came in, and I'm hell on wheels now. And I understand now what the problem was. My last name is Zweig. I was in the last row of class. If I had sat in the front of class, I could have kept my attention in school. But I was in the back. My dad being a truck driver, problem solver, was like, I'm getting in trouble every day. I tell the story, like if I saw his jeans, you're a little short kid in first grade, and so the windows are a little bit higher. I just remember if I saw his jeans and Pendleton shirt walking by, I was getting a beat. And I just remember, like, I look over and I'm like, oh man. So he brought a refrigerator box into school one day. And I sat in the back of class. I had a little flip up window in my refrigerator box. And I sat in the refrigerator box for the first 3 years because I had Mrs. Wyrick the whole time. And so anytime we had anything English related, I just got my book out. I closed my window, take the spelling test with my book. So third grade, I didn't know how to read at all. I couldn't read See Spot Run. I spent all summer third grade with Bill Miller, one of my family friends, reading specialist. And I mean, I still got a box of flashcards. I'm gonna make something out of it when I can find it again. I know it's in the garage, but it's like like I spent flashcards all summer. So the result of that was I was really good at math and science because there wasn't any reading and writing in it. So I just leveraged what I had. And then, by the sixth grade, like I won sixth grade kid of the year in middle school, science kid of the year. And then seventh grade, I started the University of Washington Science Project or Science Fair.
Now talk about this a little bit, because this turns out to be a major, trampoline for you for the academies. And like you got recognized for brain power at like eighth grade.
Yeah. So it's funny how stuff works. Like I tell people, like I'm a winner now. Like I'll cut my arm off to win. I'm gonna win. And so we were growing these blue copper beryllium crystals, right? Like it's like this blue crystal. You put it in the solution. It was stupid because all you did was change the solution every day, and there wasn't no tricks. I couldn't figure out how to win. Like it was just dumb. So at the end of sixth grade, we win, and my crystal, it was whatever. It sucked. And so I went to the science professor, who was awesome, Mr. Schultz. I said, Mr. Schultz, what else they got in this science fair? He's like, I don't know. Here's the book. So I flipped through the book, and they had this thing called a mousetrap car competition. Now it's a really big deal. Back then, it might have been a big deal, but we didn't have the internet. So you had to build a mousetrap. You had a mousetrap for an engine. So you had the spring in the mousetrap, and you had to build a car around a mousetrap. So I thought about it. I said, ooh, we can do this. So I spent right after I got my head caved in on this crystal growing thing, I started building my mousetrap car. And it took me probably a solid 3 months. And I made balsa wheels. So I made my wheels out of balsa wood. I made an axle with graphite in it. And then I had a little airplane wheel in the front. But the bottom line is I showed up in the seventh grade to the University of Washington Science Fair competition, and my car went like 135 feet, and the college kids were in the 80s. And now the world record is like 240. And the eighth grade year, my car went like 145-ish, somewhere in the 140s. So having no idea what I was doing other than just growing up in an engineering household and applying common sense, I built this car. So long story short, eighth grade, I got awarded a full college scholarship to the University of Washington for engineering based on me showing up and basically stomping on everybody that should have been able to beat me handily, but they couldn't, right? And early on, seventh grade, no one believed I built it, but then I explained how I built it. And by the eighth grade, cats knew when I showed up. The funny thing was all 10 of my friends came. You can just imagine what a science fair at the University of Washington looks like. It's a nerd convention, and I got all these athletes screaming and cheering. My car's running down. It's slow moving, but it goes. And man, we in there just dominating. So I got a scholarship in the eighth grade that I ended up parlaying, 6 months later, into some achievements that now I understand. Like I pulled a rabbit out of a hat. Like that's what I did, Cap.
And then, so one of my favorite parts of the story is somebody, probably because your influence around the neighbors, somebody starts talking to you about military academies. Now you're in eighth grade. So you're in eighth grade. You got a full scholarship to Washington. You're also an athlete. We haven't even talked about that. You're an athlete. How did this military influence start to show up?
So I talked about the A team. That's third grade, man. My bedtime was 7:00. A team came on at 7:00. So every Wednesday I had to ask for permission to watch the A-Team for an hour. You know, my dad would say yes. You know, we didn't have a VCR to record it or nothing. So if you missed it, you were trying to catch a rerun or whatever. But you know how the prime time was back then. They showed it one time and you might see it later in the future, but a lot of times you missed it. So my dad had done a couple brainwashing techniques, I'll call it. And I understand now because I do it to my kids, right? I do the same thing to my kids. This is what my dad would say every day. I'm a broke truck driver. You're going to college and going to graduate, but you got to pay for it. You got to figure it out. Every day, probably second grade on, same thing. Hey, man, I'm a broke truck driver, Jake. You're going to go to college. You're going to be successful. You're going to be a lot more successful than I am, but you got to figure out how to pay for it because I'll never be able to pay for college. So I thought my ticket was athletics. Obviously, I got a scholarship to the University of Washington, but my grandfather chirped in my ear one day, hey, you know, these service academies are free. I didn't know what a service academy was. You know, I figured out that it was Army and Navy. I didn't know it wasn't college. There was a whole bunch of things I didn't know, but I knew it was FREE. And so I talked to my grandfather. My grandfather was on the board of trustees for an insurance company and on the board for an insurance company. He was on the board of trustees for the American Red Cross in Washington. So he knew how to get stuff done. He was an insurance adjuster. And so I was talking to him and I say, Grandpa, I'm going to, send in this pre-candidate questionnaire form for the Naval Academy. I called both the schools. They sent me this package called a pre-candidate questionnaire form. He's like, hey, man.
How old are you now? How old are you?
So it was the summer of 8th grade. So I was going into 9th grade. And he's like, let's get some letters of recommendation. And this probably was the most monumental thing that happened in the process because he's like, let's go to Admiral Russell, 4-star admiral who designed the aircraft carrier, who probably once or twice a summer we would go up to his house on American Lake and go swimming. My grandfather, me, and Admiral Russell. Admiral Russell swam every day, like half a mile in a wetsuit in the winter. Great dude, former Academy guy. And so he wrote me a letter of recommendation that was phenomenal. And then I said, well, dang, if I got one from that admiral, let me go get General Turner, I was dating one of his foster childs, Debbie Maxey. And I was like, oh, let's go get General Turner. So I went up to General Turner's house and knocked on the door and said, hey, man, can I get a letter of recommendation from you? I had no idea who he was at the time. So he turned out to be the first Black medical officer in the Army, first Black commanding officer in Korea of a medical detachment, first Black theater detachment commander, and then he was the first Black general of a doctor in the Army, right? I didn't know any of that. Call it, 1986-ish. I just know he was 2-star general, and my grandfather said I needed some letters of recommendation, so he wrote me a phenomenal letter of recommendation, packaged all that up, turned it in, and I got a photocopied letter to the Naval Academy, said that I got admitted. I thought it was a joke, so I kind of put it in. I had this box of letters and stuff that I was getting already from schools and colleges, and so I put it in that box. I didn't think nothing of it. And then my sophomore year of high school, beginning of my sophomore year of high school, I got a huge acceptance package from West Point. And so as the story goes, I said, man, well, maybe that Naval Academy letter maybe that's real. So I went back, called the Naval Academy. Dude tried to give me some crap, and I just was like, look, dude, I got the letter. I don't know what to tell you. I said, maybe I was wrong. Okay, don't worry about it. And then I went to hang the phone up, and he was like, wait. And he came back and screaming at me, I don't know who you are, but you're the 3rd person in the class of 94. Congratulations. I was like, all right.
And you're 10th grade now.
10th grade, right? I didn't know, hung the phone up. All right, well, this college stuff ain't that hard then. So,
Now, Jake, let's go back. Where did your desire, you mentioned it a couple times, your desire to win, where do you think the core inside of you, where did that desire to win and not lose, where did that come from? And where does it still probably come from in Jake?
I'm going to say it's innately in me. Because I can remember being 4 years old in the play, and the angels, were there was 3 angels, and all 3 of the bad kids were the angels, and obviously I was an angel. And I remember I dove off the stage into the crowd because I wanted to fly during the performance because I was trying to win. Right? Like I got a kid, I got one of my kids, well, really all of my kids don't like to lose, but my littlest kid, like you can ruin his whole day by beating him at something. And, the translation that I tell people is I've lost a lot early. And you got to be able to use that to fire. So I kind of changed my philosophy. I lost one wrestling match after my freshman year of high school in the regular season to Jeff Amick. And it used to drive me. I mean, I'm talking about really like anytime I'm like, oh yeah, 8 seconds left. Jeff Amick beat you. And then it's on, right? Like I could turn that switch on instantly. And I got to the SEAL teams and I learned how to turn the switch on like almost instantly with a tiger jumping out of some grass onto an elephant. So I could turn the violent switch on immediately. But then I learned about you got to let those losses go. So one of the things I talk about is, an Olympic wrestler holds a loss for 8 seconds. And here I am holding a loss for 20 years, right? Like I'm riding this loss like I stole something. But inherently, you're kind of shading the loser's mentality, right? Now, it gave me a lot of gas, but I want to win. So I've kind of cut that away. But early on, like I mean, you ask any of my friends, they'll tell you I'm the same dude since 6th grade. I'm going to find a way to win. I tell everybody, like, I'm going to find a way to win. And there's a bunch of places in my life where I easily could have thrown in the towel and took an L. And I'm going to do what everybody else won't so that I can achieve what everybody else can't. And that's Jerry Rice. And that's how I am. And that's just where it comes from, right? Like, I think that aspect of it is inherently in me to win. Now, how I've manifested it over the years has changed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a hardline goal guy. Hardline. Like, my goal is to be a national championship head coach. I'm not going to get out of coaching until I achieve that goal. I read a book, 2001, John Elliott, Overachievement, probably one of the most fundamental shifts in my life. And it's basically like take the best opportunity. It'll lead you back to greatness, right? It'll lead you back to winning. And so like I turned down a job with Oprah Winfrey for $2,700 a day. Like, why? I'm making $7,000 as a graduate assistant at Maryland. I turned it down. And I look back and there's some fundamental, me and John had a long conversation about some fundamental places in life where I made bad decisions. Let me say this. I didn't never make a bad decision. I just made decisions that were less than optimal for long-term growth, right? So
now, along with that desire to win, I was just listening to what you had to say about it. Over the years, it sounds like what also comes with that is preparation and discipline and holding yourself accountable. Those 3 things is what I'm hearing in the words you're saying.
Massive amount. So one of my favorite like discipline stories, I went to the Naval. John, you good with that? Or are we going to transition like Naval Academy?
We can go. That's good. Keep going.
Okay, so I got the Naval Academy, okay? First thing I tell everybody, I didn't know I was going to military school. You're like, oh, how do you do that? Well, you get in the Naval Academy as a freshman in high school. Never take a visit, never have anybody sit you down. I tell people, I had 200 people from West Point in my town. My town is a huge West Point town. Not one person sat me down and said, hey, Jake, here's what you're getting into. Matter of fact, I had a couple people tell me, you'll never make it. Nick Davis failed out in West Point. You're never going to make it if Nick failed out. And I would always chuckle, right? I'd be like, I was in chemistry as a sophomore with Nick as a senior. Nick was doing work. I wasn't doing anything. I got a B. He got an A. I know how hard Nick was working in chemistry. I'm not scared of chemistry. Okay. So I didn't understand what I was getting into. So therefore, the first 3 years at the Naval Academy, I'm not even going to say I was in shock. I was in complete denial. So I'm not a conformist. And as you probably can imagine, the military academies are trying to get you to conform. So I'm going to do everything I can not to conform, including not cutting my hair from freshman year to the end of my sophomore year. I didn't cut my hair. My hair was like 11 inches long. I had a little trick to hide it, but like I was doing everything in my power not to conform to the Naval Academy. And the results was I got a ton of trouble. All of it was stupid. Like I didn't do nothing major. but it added up and it added up and it accumulated, and 270 marching tour or 270 days on restriction and hundreds of marching tours later, I want to be a Navy SEAL. I crushed everything. I was in football at the time and I had a decent screener, not a great screener, but I crushed the screener where they beat on you for 3 days, murdered everything. I thought for sure I was going to get selected. I didn't get selected. And so I had to come up with a plan that took me. So that was October of 94. I didn't get to SEAL training until October of 97. And I had to execute a plan with 75 steps in it. And any one of those steps that I failed in, I wouldn't achieve the goal to just get to SEAL training, not pass SEAL training, just get there. So like when you talk about discipline, I tell everybody, man, like don't look at what I've done and think I just walked in there. Like I got to SEAL training. I gave up my 30 days of leave after graduation. So you get 30 days of leave. I said, I can't do that. I got to be in school. Like I'm fighting the clock because when you want to transfer into SEALs, you got to get qualified in the job that you got assigned. So I got assigned to drive ships. If you miss that first, so if I missed the board in 96, the detailer is going to give me orders for my next job and I got to go do them. So what happens is a lot of guys show up to BUD/S 4 years after they graduate because they don't get qualified before that, in my time frame, 96 board that they got to meet. Yeah, I wasn't doing that. So I gave up everything, put my head in the ground, got to my ship, worked 120-hour weeks, got my qualification. I was signed off in 4 months. Normally it takes 18 months to 24 months to get your qualification. I got my qualification in like 6 months, got picked up on the first board, got to go to SEAL training, But that was a 18-month process for me.
What are some of the things that you learned about yourself as it relates to that, not having the right expectation, then understanding what it takes, and then through that process, what did you learn about yourself?
It's interesting. By that point, so I had played football at the Naval Academy. I didn't get to play.
Oh, by the way, can I tell them how big you are, or will you do that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think because he played against Bowling Green also. And he was murderous. The guy played nose guard, and I don't want to offend. So, dude, you have to say the height.
5'7".
5'7". He's playing against Notre Dame. Johnny, he's starting
5'7" ball of fire, though.
Yeah.
Fire, bro.
He doesn't care if the guy's 6'7", he's going up against.
I want him to be 6'7" because they couldn't block me. I'm too low and too fat.
I'm telling you, dude, in Division I football, I can almost bet that I've never seen a 5'7" nose guard.
Murder. Cat, I coached football 15 years. Them cats would be hazing me. I put the film on, then they would never say another word. Would never say. I tell people, maybe the best play I ever made was against, I don't even know who it was, Duke. They flew through a flare screen on the sidelines. I made the tackle for a 1-yard loss. I was playing nose guard.
Unbelievable. Now, I know based upon your background being an all-state wrestler, and winning a state championship in wrestling, that had a lot to do with your balance and a lot to do with what you were doing on the football field. But that whole process of being an athlete, did you also wrestle? Did you go back to wrestling at Navy too? Holy
yeah. So my sophomore year, I had a coach. So we'll talk about this when we get into leadership and losing and winning, right? I tell everybody, like, a loser's mentality is just as strong as a winner's mentality. And so we had George Chomp and the crew. He's passed now, so I'm fine. But, they came from Marshall, where they were the most talented team in FCS, and they won a national championship, and they came to Navy, which is at the absolute opposite end of that spectrum. And they did a couple things. They refused to change. They continued to try to pound square peg in the round hole, and they didn't want to play winners, right? They were more worried about how big you were than what you could do on the football field. So I had a position coach, man. I mean, I've been around some good losers in college football. I've been around some of the best losers. I'm just going to tell you, they're losers, all right? But my position coach would tell me, he said, Jake, I don't care. I had 5 sacks, 2 touchdowns, a safety, and 8 tackles for loss against Fork Union in a JV game my sophomore year. The first thing my position coach said to me was, whatever you do, don't think you're going to get on the field for the big boys. I don't care what you do. I don't care I don't care if you score 100 touchdowns, you're never going to play. So I was like, So my sophomore, I started running every day. So I ran every day of high school. It was one of the things that happened. I took a lot of lumps as a freshman in high school in wrestling. I lost 9 wrestling matches. I had lost 1 wrestling match the previous 2 years. Okay. So I started running every day, and it was one of my superpowers. 3 miles a day, superpower. So I stopped my freshman year really at prep school. So I hadn't ran for about 18 months. Man, I went back to what I knew. I started running every day, 3 miles a day at the Naval Academy. Got up, boom, hit the road. Then I turned into 3 5s. And so when I got to my sophomore year, when spring ball, Cap, you know how important spring ball is. So I went to spring ball my sophomore year, and I said, I'm going to give it everything I got. Everything. And I did nothing but what they wanted me to do, graded out like 92%, scored a touchdown in the spring game, all at nose guard, killing it. And I came in for Monday evaluations, and I told y'all, like, I'm not like the one thing Cap asked me, what sets me off? Like, if you try to talk down to me, we're going to have a problem. So my position coach decided to open his mouth and tell me I was a disgrace to the Naval Academy. And so I punched him in the mouth, man. Like, I jumped across the desk and throttled him. And I was like, I'm done. I didn't tell him I was done, but like after I got done beating on him, he was an old man. I didn't care. Like, he's taking some lumps today. And so I ended up losing 60 pounds. So I lost 60 pounds. I had a stress fracture in my right leg. So I spent 2-3 hours a day in the swimming pool, another 2 hours on the assault bike, and I lost 60 pounds. And then I went and wrestled, and I lost the challenge match. I had to do stand-ups an hour a day in the morning, and then I came back and I wrestled that season. I wrestled most of it at varsity. Junior, that was my junior year, so I wrestled most of that in varsity. And then at the end of my junior year, I blew out my sternum. I fractured my sternum and 3 ribs, and then that was pretty much it. I wrestled my senior year, but just to wrestle with Zembeck, because he asked me to come in and wrestle with him, and it was good. Like, I got a lot of good friends on the wrestling team, like Mike Clayton, Danny Hicks, Kyle. Like, I just got a bunch of good friends, because wrestling's one of those sports where, there ain't no hiding from work, and
Not hide.
You can't hide. So, I tell the Doug Zembeck story. When I got there in my end of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year for wrestling, you run stadiums with somebody on your back. Well, I had just got out of football. I weighed 180, but I was squatting like 520. So I could run with somebody on my back. Well, I wasn't squatting as much when I came back my senior year. And Doug was like, we had lap people the year before. Doug was like, what's wrong with you, horse? What's wrong with you? You're fired. And so Doug fired me because I couldn't keep up. But Doug Zembeck, was a bad dude, man. Ended up getting killed in Iraq in 2007. So my oldest son is named Zembeck, Douglas Zweig after Doug Zembeck. But there were setbacks all through the Naval Academy. There just was. And so you asked me what I learned. I learned really bad leadership at the Naval Academy. And from that really bad leadership, I learned how to be a great leader. Don't do that. I tell everybody, some of the best leadership you're going to learn is when you got a really bad leader and you're like, don't ever be like that. Like, don't ever be like that. Like, we had this guy that would stand in the hallway. So you have to, as a freshman, you have to run down the middle of the hallway. He would stand right in the middle of the hallway, right in your path, and just scream at you. I was like, man, what are you trying? And he's a little dude that this was always my saying, man. I will slap you so hard. Like, you're just all bravado because you're a second class or a junior, right? Like, you're nobody. You are a nobody. You've been a nobody. You got put in charge, and now you think you're God. And so when I got in charge as a senior, I told my guys, I said, listen, man. I said, we had 3 athletes, 2 football players. My girl, Tammy Mason, shout out Tammy Mason, married to my guy, John Choate, who I went to SEAL training with. She was on cross country, beat me in a 3-mile race. I still hold it against her, but I couldn't run very well. But I told my upper class, I said, you're performance grade is directly tied to their grades, period. So if you want to come to the table and if I hear you yelling at them, like, it's over. And so we had the best grades in the battalion. You know, everybody, I'd have 6 freshmen at my table for lunch because, like, what's the point of yelling at a kid at lunch about aircraft carrier length or the number of aircraft that an aircraft carrier can shoot? Nothing. Like, I'm about leadership and results. My job is to make sure those freshmen get grounded, have a great foundation for the rest of the time at the Naval Academy, and they learn good leadership. Screaming at people is not good leadership. That's bad leadership.
So, Jake, let's talk today about what you do today. And as part of that, what makes a great leader and what you try to get across to organizations today.
So right now, I just shut a business down in November. Was working for the Blue Monster, Amazon. They're the devil. They don't treat people or contractors very well. Actually, it's the worst place I've ever been. But from that, right, got to find a way to win. I built a world-class team that beat them every day. So, I'm working on right now. I help a big nonprofit called Pilot with a 4 for the 0. And we produce leaders for the military. Really, we produce leaders everywhere because we got a bunch of kids going to Harvard this year from medical school. But I spend a lot of my time mentoring. I spend the other part of my time, I'm trying to buy a business right now, trying to get into the game, having ran a business and understanding what it takes. But I tell everybody, my superpower in life is the ability to get a group of people to go in a direction and then to grow leadership under me so that it becomes a phenomenal organization through the growth of leadership.
So what's the hardest part about getting a group of people that you take over to go in the same direction?
I'm going to tell you the hardest part, and it's the easiest thing for me, and I think that's why I've been so successful, is identifying the person that can make the whole room go in the right direction. And that is the key to what I do. I tell everybody, like, I'll be the best leader in the room, but I'm only the best leader if I can make another best leader in the room. So if I got to lead the project, then there's a problem.
And then how do you identify that person? Talk about the attributes that person typically has or what you look for.
So I always start with capable. They have to be a capable person. And then the next aspect of it, they have to be driven. So I have a person right now who is a complete rock star who ran my company at 21 years old, $7 million company, ran the whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel, leadership, everything. And she lacks a little drive. So she's had some opportunities that she didn't take because she doesn't have the drive to kind of push through that. She doesn't want to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. She just wants to live life, but she's phenomenal. She'll tell you, I want to be a good number 2. So I always start with capable, right? They got to be a capable person. If you're not a capable person, I can't put you in charge. The next thing I look for is, do you want to be good? Because there's a lot of people out there that are super capable and they don't want to do the work to be great. They don't want to put in the time. I tell everybody, I spent 2,000 hours with her. 2,000 hours to get her to the point where she could run a $7 million company by herself. There's no small expenditure of time to make good leaders, especially when they're young, because they don't have any idea what they're doing. She was doing some stuff in her personal life that I was like, you can't do that.
But do you find that sometimes people don't see themselves as being the leader, and that's the hardest part? Maybe they have the capabilities or the characteristics, but they actually don't have the experience of actually being the leader, and they don't actually see themselves as being the leader. And that's a hard part in getting them to step up.
So I have a process that I do, Mac, that it's interesting. I'll just listen to John Maxwell. John Maxwell says, when you've done it enough, you understand your process to the point where you can go anywhere and replicate your process. Okay. Mm-hmm. So my process starts with, as soon as I got her, she's going to call 5 people that were in her shoes when I got them. Okay. And she's going to have a long conversation with all of them. So she had an hour and a half conversation with 6 different people that were in her shoes exactly in the same point. I came out of the bushes. I grabbed her and pulled her back into the bushes and was like, look, you're going to run this whole thing. I'm going to get you ready. I know you're scared, but we're going down the road really fast now. Okay. And so what happens is she talked to my girl Brianna up at Illinois. Brianna was sitting there working at football. This ain't gonna cut it. You know, you got way too much potential. You got way too much capacity. What do you want to do? She's like, well, I kind of thought about going to law school. Okay, so are we thinking about going to law school? So I worked with Brianna. And she was in the same place that the other lady was in. And she just graduated from Illinois law school. She got a great job in Chicago. She's going to kill it. But they were in the same place, so they have a conversation. And I tell them all, like, give them the dirty and give them everything. Because, like, being mentored by me, Mac, ain't easy.
Yeah.
You're going to read books. I'm going to be calling you. You're going to be calling me. Like I tell you, 2,000 hours is not 2,000 hours of me handing you roses and flowers. Like, there's some hard conversations. You're going to have to make some hard changes in your life if you want to continue to do great things, right? Like, she was doing some stuff that was not good. And so we had to
besides capable and drive, what other characteristics do you look for? Are there other ones you're looking for?
That's it.
Okay.
Because here's the deal, Mac. I could take.
But if she doesn't have the drive to be number one and she only wants to be number two, then she could be a decent leader, but she'll never be the leader.
Yeah, I mean, she'll never like you could put her in charge and she'll be fine, but she just doesn't have that drive to want to go get it. And that's the difference, right? Like, I know Cap had a couple questions about the difference between the best ones and the worst ones. The best ones are a combination of capable and driven. All right. Like, they're hungry. I have a submarine captain that's been promoted 3 times early. When I say rock star, you can't beat him. All right. But he just gave up 18 years of his life to be underway on a submarine to get where he wanted to go. And now he's going over to the acquisition side. He's going to be a rock star. He's going to be an admiral. They're going to make him an admiral in 4 years. All right. He's going to be a 22-year admiral in the Navy. He's a rock star, but he's incredibly driven. I got another one that just retired, and he's interviewing for $600,000 a year jobs. He's driven. Like, he's incredibly capable and he's driven. And then on the other end of that spectrum, I got some guys that, you know, like Mac asked for a bad one. My worst one is a captain of a 737. Like, that's the worst dude I got. But he had a hard time overcoming his upbringing. You know, he grew up in a really poor household with really bad habits. And, you know, he wasn't able to break free. So a lot of times, man, like, you have to cut some people off in your family. My young lady had to cut some people off in her family. They were really bad examples. They were leading her down a really bad path. And that's hard. A lot of people can't do that, you know? And like, my worst performer is still a captain in the airlines.
Mm-hmm. But since you're dealing with people, where does intuition or a people sense or street smarts, doesn't that play a role also when you're dealing with people to figure out, you know, where they are and trying to, you know, motivate them and get them to do the types of things you know that they're capable of, but they're not doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, all of the things you said play into EQ, right? Like your emotional intelligence, your ability to talk to somebody and understand where they came from and who they are and how you can relate to them. All of that stuff is important, but I tell everybody, you know, I got another one, Kristen Argy, murdering it. She grew up her dad owns a huge accounting shop. She was a runway model for 3 years. And when I got her, when you say green, like, I got her after 3 years as a Ford runway model. And I got to an interview and she was crying. Like, I asked her the derivative of 2x in the interview. Like, I interviewed her for like 30 seconds and she started crying. And right there, I knew, like, she cared enough about her success in that interview that she started crying about the answer to the derivative of 2x because she didn't know it. And I hired her and she turned out to be a complete rock star. But I knew in a 30-second engagement that she cared enough about the derivative of 2x. What's going to happen when I give her an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation? I was working in consulting at the time at a governmental consulting shop, and she killed it. And she's done nothing but kill it since. You know, she had 2 kids. She's a vice president for Capital One right now. She's murdering it. I saw that in a 22-year-old runway model who had no business sense at all.
So how are
Some
you?
people, sorry, one more thing. Some people believe that, in order to have that drive, that desire to win, that you have to have grown up in a really tough conditions when you were a child. Do you believe that that's true? Or do you believe that people, like in my experience, maybe I'm giving a little bit of the answer. In my experience, I've seen where some people, where their father was very successful, they didn't want to follow in their father's footsteps. They have a chip on their shoulder, and that chip really drives them hard to be successful.
I think, and there's 350 million people in America. Everybody has a different story and a different
Yeah.
path,
Yeah.
right? If we're making Navy SEALs, then you got to have a rough upbringing, right? Like that's one of the defining factors. A dysfunctional family, you were on your own a lot as a kid is one of the defining factors, right? But in life, I mean, I got as many uber rich kids that are successful as I have. Like I'm mentoring kids from the Naval Academy. It's 50-50. You got kids with silver spoons and you got kids that come from nothing that had grades like I did, right? The one thing I'll say to that, and the one example I'll give you is Trump, right? Like if you ask me, Trump's a driven individual. Trump has had some failures. He got a couple bankruptcies. He's got some other stuff, but that dude is a phoenix, right? Like you look at what he's been through the last year, and he's in this election race and he's killing it. And I don't know if you could ask, or I'm sorry, I don't know if you could have a more entitled upbringing than he did. I mean, he was 13 years old building skyscrapers in New York City as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Right. And if you told me, oh, he's not driven, he's silver spoon kid, he don't want it, I'm going to be like, he's going to beat you. Right.
Well,
so I think it's hard to just quantify and just put into silos. Oh, this type of kid can do this type of kid can do that. It's all about the kid, the upbringing, how they were raised.
But how do you figure it out, Jake? You got so many people coming to you. They hear, you're a mentor. You get kids from all different backgrounds, black, white, rich, poor, cripple, blind, or crazy.
Yep.
There's a process. What really struck me when we were talking is you said one of the things that you're good at is helping people understand what they want to do and what they're capable of doing, and bringing those two worlds together might not necessarily be the right thing for them. And you help people figure that out. What's the greatest? Because we got people listening right now. They're like, hey man, I think I want to be a sales manager. I think I want to quit and I want to go to a startup. I think I want to do this. I want to change. Like when people come to you, they're like, I want to make a change. What I notice about you is you get people really connected to understanding what that change means. And I'm assuming that's because what happened to you at the Naval Academy. Do you actually understand what's going to happen to you in the first year of the Naval Academy? And nobody shared that with you. So it was a missed expectation.
So I call it the how, John. I teach people the how, right? And so that connection with people is, I tell everybody, why do we have a discrepancy with socioeconomically disadvantaged kids? They don't know the how, right? I didn't know the how. Like I graduated high school with $100,000. I ran a lot of businesses in high school, trapping. I had a trapping business in the first grade. I'm making $4,000 a winter as a kid trapping coons. Okay. I ran a sewing business. I had a candy business in high school. In middle school, I was making $400 a day for like 3 weeks before I got arrested. Okay. Like I had money when I graduated and nobody in my family told me to buy real estate. Nobody told me to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. So what do? I turn around, I get to the Naval Academy, and now I'm mentoring a bunch of kids. And I get out. 03 started the heavy mentorship. And the first thing we do is, hey, man, we buy houses. We don't sell houses. We get an MBA from Harvard or Stanford, right? Wharton, maybe, okay? We're shooting for the top 3. We're Naval Academy grads. I mean, I got a couple dudes right now that got 50-plus properties. So I teach them the how, John. That's the big thing that I tell people. How do I connect them with what they want to do and what they're capable of doing? I tell everybody, like in 05, I had a monumental failure in my mentorship program. So I had a young man from the class of 03 go to SEAL training. I knew he wasn't ready. I was kind of giving him a little candy and like, oh man, you're going to make it. But I knew deep down he wasn't going to make it. Like I knew deep down. And he went there and he got through Hell Week. and he wasn't doing what he needed to do to pass drown proofing. And the week after Hell Week, he told me, I made it, Jake. And I'm thinking to myself, it's week 5. You haven't passed drown proofing. And I know as a negatively buoyant person, drown proofing is almost impossible negatively buoyant. I passed out in the swimming pool and somehow I passed. I got lucky. Clint Bruce grabbed my ear and I was able to pass unconscious and drown proofing. But he failed and he got kicked out of training. And after that, I said, never again, man, fire and brimstone. So one of the things I tell people, like when you come into my mentorship program, you're going to do what we tell you to do, or you're not going to be in there. And that's where now with so much success, I mean, I just got a phone call the other day. We got 2 F-35 pilots in the Marine Corps called me. I talked to them 2.5 years ago. They're like, Jake, I executed everything you said. I'm flying F-35s now. I just wanted to call and say thank you. So the track record, kind of like what I was telling you with Brianna, right? The track record, I'm going to put them on the phone with a couple people. But the big thing is, John, I'm going to hold them accountable. Cap. Yeah. There ain't no left or right in this program. And that's where when you get high achievers, they thrive in that environment. What? I got to do what? Okay, I'm in. Right? I got a young lady, man. She got me so fired up. I can't even tell you how fired up, because see, I set a goal in 2003. I wanted brigade commander, which is the #1 midshipman at Naval Academy, and I wanted a Rhodes Scholar out of my group of mentees. We've had 6 brigade commanders and like 7 regimental commanders, which is the #2 position. We have yet to have a Rhodes Scholar. I got a phone call from a young, incredibly talented, going into her junior year of high school, Vietnamese lady who has a 1500 on the SAT with an 800 math, and she wants to go fly fighters in the Air Force. And I'm like, if this ain't a Rhodes Scholar. and I got a guy that's made 7 Rhodes Scholars, right? And he's like, you ain't lying, Jake. And my guy, Dell's daughter, Isabella, just won the Rhodes Scholarship at West Point this year. They are the exact same person. She's 16 years old, will speak to you like a king. And I'm like, oh my God. But she got me fired up, right? Because I know with a little bit of guidance now, she's going to be a rock star. Like she's going to get to the Air Force and just run through the Air Force. She's going to go to flight school. She's going to run through flight school. She's going to fly 22s in the Air Force, or that's probably 7 years away. You don't know what she's going to do,
What's really cool about that story, bro, is I remember sitting with Mac in Denny's. I'm not going to tell you how we got to the Denny's because that's just going to expose him for being so impatient. But we're sitting at the Denny's and I said, hey, man, I wanted to be a part of the team. And he was the leader of the team. And I said, what's it going to take? What is it going to take to be successful? And he didn't even hesitate, Jake. He took out a piece of paper, on a napkin in a Denny's. He wrote out the process that you have to go through to be excellent in sales execution. And Johnny, I don't know if you remember this or not. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it and I said, that's all you got to do? And he said, that's all you got to do. And I was getting ready to reach for the paper and he pulled it back a little bit. He said, hang on. He said, what you got to understand is if you do this, I guarantee you it's going to change your life. If you don't do this, you're out. You're not going to make it here. And I don't know how. And all the conversation I've had with John McMahon and in the decades that I've known him, that's one of the most memorable conversations I've ever had. So then, as me, and I want this to resonate for our audience, I'm talking to somebody who's made it. I'm talking to somebody who's led great teams and has what I want. And when I go ask for how to do it, and that person tells me how to do it, and gives me a formula, I have to look at that and say, do I trust that formula or not? Is there evidence? And it was really simple for me. People are like, how in the world are you leaving Xerox after 10 years and you're going to go work for this software company? They're going to pay you like a fraction of what and I remember I brought it up a little bit for John, but not too much. I was like, hey, I had 3 kids. I'm like, and John just looked at me and he said, I think I had a salary of $150,000 and the district manager salary that he was recruiting me for was $40,000. And he didn't make fun of me. He just looked at me and he said, hey, John, you're not coming here for the salary. He didn't make fun of me. He knew I had 3 kids. He didn't make fun of me, didn't shame me or whatever. He said, if you don't believe you're going to make 3 times what you're making where you're at, do not come. And so I want people to kind of understand the responsibilities in that story. There's the Jakes and Johns of the world, McMahons of the world, who tell you you want to be like them, let's say. They tell you what you have to do. You then look at it and say, just like you said, Jake, capability, capable and driven. Am I capable of doing that? Am I driven enough to do that? Because I had to have a lot of sacrifices to go do what I wanted to go do. And then do I believe that I can get that outcome? Is there evidence? Is this dude just running his mouth and telling me? No, they went from 0 to $1 billion in less than 10 years. The stock split 5 times in 7 years. Like, are you with me? So like that's where those two worlds come together. And I just want our audience, if you're a leader listening to this, you have a responsibility to tell it like it is. If you're a person that's being led, you have a responsibility to own that process.
So Cap, I'm going to tell you right now, to a T, this is my pitch. What I'm giving you is the blueprint to success.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you the how to get to where you want to go. In 6 months, you won't recognize yourself. In a year, you'll be a totally different person. Now, it's going to be scary. It's going to be hard. There is no wavering on your commitment to getting to where you want to go. But in 6 months, we're going to look back. And so I always ask, like my girl I'm talking about, man, I'll never forget it. 6 months in, she had came from she had come out the bowels of hell. Okay. 6 months, we're taking a lap. So when we take a lap, we have a long conversation, hour lap around the building, huge building. And she started crying. And I said, I told you. She said, I can't believe where I'm at right now. 6 months ago, I would have never in a million years thought this was in my future. And I said, yeah. I said, but think about where you're going to be in a year from now. Right? She's thinking about the last 6 months. I'm already thinking about the next year. And now she owns a home. She's killing it in her new job. And we just talked today. She turned down an opportunity to go take this kind of deal. And I don't necessarily think it's the best thing for her, but I can't live her life for her, right? I know this, the path she's going down now, because of my Submariner being in acquisitions, and she get a GS-13 job in acquisitions, I'm going to make her SCS in like the next 10 years. So she'll be a general in the military at 32 years old.
You know what I love about this story, Mac, is that we live in a playbook culture on our side, Jake. Like Johnny and I come from a playbook culture, and you go execute the playbook and you crush it. But I tell you that everybody's talking about playbook culture, doing playbooks. Johnny, you need leaders that can go take a lap. You need leaders that, I remember when you called me this is a true story. McMahon called me 6 months into it and I was freaking dying. And he said, how you doing? And I said, I'm struggling, man. And he goes, and he knew I was struggling. So he said, okay, so what's going on? And I said, you know what? I just don't, because I was a little bit older than the typical PTC rep at the time. I had 3 kids and I wasn't impressed with all the bravado and all this crap going on and banging chest or whatever. I needed to make a living. And I said, I don't think I'm like these people. And he's like, who's these people? And I said, the people I'm working with. He said, I didn't hire you to be like these people. I hired you to come here and do what you do. And he hung up on me. That's a true story. Yep. And it was so motivating. I finished the year. I was the #1 district manager in the company. But I wasn't at 6 months. I was kind of looking for the bell, Jake. You with me? I was looking, where are they ringing that bell at, bro?
So, Cap, I'm going to tell you what you were looking for. You were looking for some sympathy. Yeah. Right? You wanted him to talk to you about crying. I tell people, man, you call me, I'm going to slap the piss out you, man.
Yeah.
Like you're not, like, don't call me. So my video dude is phenomenal. Former E4 in the Army, been doing my videos for the last 4 years. 3 years ago, he made a jump into sales. And so he's in sales, he's fighting it out. We had a long conversation about some sales books that I like, talk about negotiating, just low-level sales stuff. He gets in, he kills it. He just got this opportunity 6 months ago to go work for this firm that sells security. So he calls me, same thing. Hey, man, I'm struggling. It's okay. Talk to me about what you're doing. He's like, Jake, I'm just not closing like these other guys are, and da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. And I said, look, are you recording all your conversations? He said, yeah, all my conversations are recorded. I said, every night I want you to go back and listen to the conversations that you won on 5, and I want you to listen on the 5 conversations that you lost on. He said, I said, hey, no. You know how this works. I got you, okay? So boom, he hang the phone up, calls me a month later. He said, I'm murdering it. I said, what did you have to change? He said, there was a little nuance in what I was saying towards the end of my call. On the winners, I was saying this. On the losers, I was saying that. He said, I'm only saying this now. He said, the other thing is, I had a win in churches. And he said, all I'm doing is calling churches now. Okay. So then what happens? I understand how to win. And you're doing something different. If you're winning a little bit and you're not winning over here, you're doing something differently in them ones you're not losing. It's sales. So I just had a guy call me about cybersecurity. He wanted me to give him business. And I said to him, I said, wait a minute. I said, are you calling all the car salesmen in the country right now? Because they just got held ransomware for $800 million. Have you called them? He said, no, I didn't hear about that. I said, so let me tell you something. I said, if you're in cybersecurity, you better be reading a lot of stuff and trying to find who's getting attacked and who has vulnerabilities, because they're hungry for solutions. He called me back a week later. He said, Jake, I just had 4 sit downs with car dealerships. And he said, I got 3 of them on board. He said, I can't believe in 1 week how changed my outcome, right? Like you're saying, I tell everybody, like, don't call me for sympathy, man. You talking to a dude that had to go in a hole for 18 months to get the SEAL training, and then got the SEAL training and was almost killed because I was out of shape. So
maybe that's the lesson I should have learned, Johnny Mac, calling you for sympathy.
Well, the thing is, right now, if somebody's listening, it sounds like there's 3 hard asses on this podcast. The reality is, if you want to transform people, they're gonna go through a really rocky road, and it's gonna take them a long time. It could take them 6 months, 9 months, a year. It could take a lot longer. But you know that once they're transformed, they're never going back. They're not only changed in the job that they can do, their character has been changed, and they will never, ever going back to that person they used to be. Just never. And that's the part that, as a leader, you're fighting in them. You're not giving in to them, because you hear that they want to give in. They want some sympathy. They want you to ring the bell, and you're not going to do it.
And to be clear, McMahon called me. So he was unbelievable at showing up at the right time. I didn't call him and say it's not working out. He called me and said, how's it going? And you got to know your people.
You got to know your people. That's the key too. It's like Jake said, they got to be capable, and they have to have that desire to win. And if they have those things and you believe that it's innate in them, then you got to keep pushing them along, right?
So McMahon, you talk about the push
because they're trying to give in.
100%. So like I tell people, your EQ has got to be high enough that you can look at John McMahon or John Kaplan in the morning and be like, he's having a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
Come here. What's wrong? So my young lady, right? Come here. What's wrong? Right. They always start to say, okay. Right. And right. And you knew they were having a bad day, but okay. What decisions did you make to put yourself in that position to have that day you had? Right. Sometimes we know the dice just didn't roll in your favor. It's going to be a bad day no matter what. But a lot of times you didn't take preparation in the past to prevent a problem from happening in the future. And now you're pissed because you got a bad day. But I'm going to use that to train you. I'm going to use that to be like, all right, a leader's number one job is to look into the future, see problems, take corrective action now so that those problems don't have any chance of manifesting in the future. And that's hard for a lot of people, right? Like you're saying, John, like it's a people game, number one, and then it's ability to solve problems. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure I got in here for all your listeners, I was listening to John Maxwell today, and he said, leaders like ideas that were theirs. One of the things that I love, I always tell people, I'm trying to execute on your ideas because you're always going to do a better job on your ideas. And I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room, ever. And so a lot of times leaders, one of the biggest mistakes I see out there, Cap, is leaders want their ideas to be executed. And I tell people, if you want monumental success, you let your people execute their ideas and maybe guide the semblance a little bit, right? Like you guide the party line a little bit. I mean, one of my axioms is the 50-25 rule. If my idea ain't 50% better than yours, or your idea has a 25% chance of catastrophic failure, I'm letting you do your idea every time. Because you're going to execute on your idea better than you're going to execute on mine. I have tons of great ideas all the time, but I'm not going to execute it. I'm the leader. So I try to push that down, but that's where that culture comes in, the growing leadership, right? Like I've raised leaders. That's all I do is raise leaders. And you raise the leaders to understand that, and then they understand, like, I don't know how to be my idea. I'm going to make it the next person's idea. Pretty soon you got a world-class organization where everybody's trying to look forward, solve problems, and come up with the next best thing, right? Come up with the next idea. So
love that. So Jake, we covered so much ground here. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to, like, the people can understand, like, you talked about your nonprofit. Give us some information on your nonprofit so our people can participate in that. And then tell us a little bit about, like, how people can engage with you.
So right now we've kind of made a transition. I haven't monetized anything I was doing. Like, we've been at this for 25 years. It's pretty much been all free. Now we got a Discord. So I was on Zoom, but now we got 300 people in a Discord group. The big platform we're using now is Schools Classrooms. It's an app where we basically build an environment or a community. And we've got everything in there from pilots to medical school rooms to entrepreneurial room to you name it, right? Leadership across the board, Army OCS rooms in there. We got the Navy SEAL Masterclass. I'm building out some kind of how masterclasses for just everybody. How to be more successful, how to, get to where you want to go. One of the big things we haven't talked about is mentorship. So 5, 10, and 20-year mentors. I tell everybody, mentorship is the key to getting anywhere because you yourself can't come up with the how. You're shooting maybe 20% if you try to come up with it. But like you got McMahon, right? Like Mac knows the how. He told you the how. All you got to do is follow the process. Speeds up development, speeds up success, and allows you to be, incredibly successful. So I tell everybody I'm the most successful person in the world. My email is just my first name last name at Gmail. If you put my name in, it's going to come up. It's all over the place. Reach out. We're doing a ton of stuff. I do public speaking. I just spoke in Virginia Beach. It was crazy. We talked to a mortgage company about, hardship, right? Like the mortgage industry is getting hit right now. You got to figure out a way to be different. COVID was crushing people. I murdered COVID. Like I got so much done every day during COVID. Like I tell people, man, how did you look at COVID like a bad thing? I was locked in the house and man, I got to spend every day, all day with my 3 young kids. We rode bikes for 2 hours in the day. I rebuilt my Galaxy. Like we did everything. I built a master class. I had to get up at 4:30 because I couldn't get nothing done once they woke up at 7. But like you got to change your perspective on how you look at things in life, right? And that's one of the big things. We're trying to buy a business right now. We're talking about private equity. I'm looking for an opportunity to lead a company, and I don't want no shiny Mercedes-Benz. I want a trash can fire. Right? Like that's what I'm looking to lead. Like you give me something that you guys are like, man, this thing got a 1% chance of making it. And I'm going to come in there and tell you, I got the innate ability to do the impossible consistently. And then I'm going to show you. Right? So I don't think you can't turn anything around. And that's what I'm looking for. Like I'm looking for an opportunity to get back in the fight. I'm kind of been sitting over here for a year now, raising my kids, working on a bunch of stuff, getting a house rehab. We're almost done with that. It's time to jump back in the fire.
You're awesome. You're awesome, buddy. I can't thank you enough for spending time with us. You shared great insights. You can find Jake, just like he said, that's how I found him after I got the heads up from one of our listeners. You pop his name, Zweig, into Google or any search engine, and he's going to pop up. So, Jake, thanks a lot for being with us, brother.
Hey, John and John, thank y'all 1,000 times over. Rachel, thank you for hiding in the background and making sure we didn't blow nothing up over here. How we like to get sometimes. But I really appreciate the opportunity, man, and wish y'all the best of luck on Revenue Builders and go get after it.
Jake, you're on fire, man. You're on fire. I love it.
Yes, sir. Energy, baby. Energy.
Gotta have it all the time.
All the time.
But thanks to Jake, thanks to Cap and Rachel, and thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.